So my name's Dan Kinzelman, and I am a saxophone player from the United States, but I live in Italy. I've been living in Italy now for about 13 or 14 years, and I play, the main project I play with is called Hobby Horse. It's a trio, and we really never know what to call the music, but I guess one thing we call it sometimes is adventure jazz or crazy jazz. It's kind of like experimental music, and it has a lot of influences from different genres, because we listen to a lot of different kinds of music. And we've been playing together for about 10 years now. We're here in Budapest because we played yesterday at the Opus Jazz Club. Well, the beginning of Hobby Horse, the bass player is also from the United States, and he and I went to the university together, and we became very good friends. When I moved to Europe, he started to visit me a lot in Europe. And when he started to think about moving to Europe, actually, to live in Italy, I wanted to start a band with him. I didn't have like any real main projects at the time, and we tried several different drummers and didn't really find somebody that was working for us. And then I met Stefano, and I remember it was kind of like, he was a self-trained musician. He didn't read music at all. And I remember we did a rehearsal at his house for another project, and I taught him all this music, and he would take notes in a notebook. So he wrote down he would write words for himself or draw little pictures instead of having like music notation. And I was really concerned. I was like, well, he's never going to learn how to play this music because it was complicated. And then like 2 weeks later, we did the gig, and he sounded amazing. And I thought, this is like really crazy. So at that point, I was really interested to try to play with Joe and him. And we did, I found a gig, and he came, and it was just kind of this immediate feeling of like really interesting and exciting dialogue. So I think that from then on, we didn't really decide to play this kind of music. I mean, most of the songs at the beginning I wrote them, but they're very simple and open structures, and everybody was really free to try things. And because I feel like when we play, it's kind of like a fun conversation, or like we almost like are really playing, like having fun. Everything that kind of came out in the future came from this experience of just trying things and seeing if they would work. And I think we learned to trust each other and kind of save each other when we make mistakes. So I think that's kind of really how it developed organically. I always played with the piano, even from when I was very little, and but I was always very attracted to the saxophone, and I think it has this like very human vocal quality about it, and it's very expressive, and that's something that attracted me. So I just started playing saxophone when I think I was probably 11 or 12, and I continued. It wasn't always easy, but I feel like I've been very lucky to make so far a career out of it. Well, I guess that's actually a very hard question to answer. There's an interview I read by Kenny Wheeler when somebody asked him about how his compositional process worked. And he said, well, I don't really know, and I'm kind of afraid that if I go and look, then I won't be able to make it work anymore. So in a way I could answer that. But the other thing I do find is that a lot of times I think about the way, like if I think about the music that I make, because the bands I'm in, I like the interaction. I think that's the really important thing for me, the social aspect of it. And so I like to think about, like, if I were going to have a conversation with them, what do I want to talk about? And I try to write things that I would want to talk about with them, or things that I imagine them sounding amazing playing. And then I guess another thing I think about is just kind of emotional states. And I imagine like a feeling, and then how that would, but it's very difficult for me then. I don't necessarily remember what the feeling was that I was trying to get, but I have this feeling that I want to achieve when I write sometimes, I guess. I come to Europe. Well, in the university, in the United States, I grew up. I graduated from high school in 2000. So there's also like a technological aspect to this, which I find interesting also, because I think about how crucial it is to everything that we do now. And that is the fact that at the time, Napster was happening, which I don't know if you remember Napster, but it was like the very first, I think, online music sharing service, but it was really disorganized and also illegal, and there was no YouTube or anything, and Spotify and all that stuff was in the future. So if you didn't have a record, basically, you had you couldn't listen to the music. And then with Napster, you could potentially listen to it, but you wouldn't know what music to look for. And in the United States, it was really hard to get European jazz music. So there was very little ECM available even. The only things that I remember seeing regularly were like the Colton concert, like there's a little bit of Keith Jarrett, but there was no Luis Clavi, so it was pretty hard to find Kenny Wheeler. It was pretty hard to find Jan Garbarek, all this stuff. It was really hard to come across that music in the United States. At least it was hard for me. And in the university, I started to discover that, because they had a pretty well-furnished music library, and I started to listen to a lot of this old like ECM stuff on LPs that they had. And I remember hearing this music from the 70s and thinking, oh, this is so modern, but it was like music from 30 years ago. but it was so new to me and so fresh, and I was really curious about that. And also there were some European musicians that had come to study, so a lot of them I found really interesting, their approach and the fact that it was very different from what I had come across with up to that point. And so I was also discovered that I was really interested in languages. I started studying German, so I thought, well, maybe I'll just try it. I finished university, and I didn't have any immediate plans to move to New York or anything like that. I had a little bit of money left over because I had some scholarships, so I said I'll just go to Germany because that's where ECM is, which was kind of like really, I mean, that's another thing, is like I couldn't actually do real research. The internet was also a lot younger then. So I just went to Germany, and then when I was in Germany I met some Italian musicians, and they started to call me to play shows in Italy, and I moved to Italy. And I think the thing that I've found, I feel like I've been pretty lucky to find Italy at the time that I did, because it was a kind of a scene that allowed me to grow rapidly, and I had a lot of chances to work right away because the skill set that I had was in demand. But I was also very young and had a lot to learn, which I still do. And it gave me a lot of chances to learn things, a lot of chances to try things, and it's a world that has allowed me to have this band, which has now been going on for 10 years, and I care about it a lot, and we just do the music that we want to do, and somehow it's working. So I feel that would have been hard to do anywhere, maybe else in the world, but definitely in Miami it would have been very difficult. Yeah, I don't know what to say about musicians that influenced me. I mean, I think it was really clear to me when I was studying which musicians were influencing me. So the various like saxophone players or soloists and things that influenced me. I guess I don't necessarily think about that so much anymore, in terms of like musicians that play my instrument that influence me. But I would say that now, recently, I've been listening to a lot of. William Basinski, and like actually a lot of like ambient music, and also like nature sounds. And there's also an Italian composer whose music I love and has really changed my life, and his name's Alessandro Bosetti, and he's had like a really strong influence, I think, on Hobby Horse as well, because a lot of the things we do with words we started to write those after we saw his concert. He did a performance in Berlin that we saw, and we had no idea who he was, but it was like so amazing. So Alessandro Bosetti, I recommend you check out his music if you get the chance. He has an amazing trio called Trophies.